Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to today's class. Um, Sorry if we had any delays in starting. We had I was in. I had a little bit of technical issues, but I'm ready and let's get started. So today we're going to be doing something really interesting, and we are going to be exploring grid and flex layout, right? And just give me a sec. Uh, Let me share my screen so things don't look like blank. Before I share, let me just get some things out of the way. Oh, okay. So now I share my screen. Uh, Sorry, for some reason things are like slower today with the whole process. Okay, so I hope you guys can hear me clearly. All right, so now you want to say something? Okay. All right, sorry. Let's get started. So let's zoom this up a bit and let's see if I can look for a different VS Code app we could use. Okay, so yeah, let's look at this one. Let's use this one instead. This is the one we were using before, right? So let's continue with this. So today we are going to be looking at flex system, right? Um, Please give me some second. Let me see if I can turn off some things that are taking up quite some memory. Create, yeah, create, create. Okay. Zoom should be quit. Okay. Okay, so I think we are good. All right, so we have more. I think we have more memory to work with now. All right, so um, flex. Flex systems are basically means for us to arrange um, our HTML element in either rows or in either uh, rows. Sorry, in rows and columns, either horizontally or vertically. This is very important. So let's see if I can bring out a drawing tool that we could use so I could explain something about grid and flex system. Okay, let's use this one we have here. I'm going to be drawing just here to explain some things. All right. So grid system, you have just grid system. Sorry, flex system helps you arrange elements in rows and columns, right? However, there's something very important you should be aware with flex system. So I'm going to do this as an example. So let's say we have this box here, right? So this box here in a grid system, it can be, I should have used FigJam, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so this box here can be um, separated into rows like this, right? Into several rows, right? Are you guys with me? So this row, so this this horizontal, this before we started writing, drawing these lines, right? This here can be referred to as a row, right? This is a row. So let's do it this way. Let me label it as a text, so it makes it easier. So for those who can't see clearly, let me zoom in, right? So this can be referred to as a row, right? Let's increase the text to something big. Um, okay. Okay, so this is good. All right, so this can be referred to as a row when it comes to grid systems, right? This rectangle we have here, right? Then columns are basic. So I'm going to put this at the top. Then we have something called columns. So columns are basically this, right? So just to make the line a little bit straight, so I'm going to do this, right? So these boxes inside of this row can be referred to as columns, right? So now, I'm going to abbreviate it using the word COL to represent column. So these are columns, right? So in this scenario, we have a couple of columns, right? So we have this as the first column, we have this as the second column, and this is the third column. Sorry, my system is a little bit laggy. And this as the final column. I need to restart the system. I always forget. All right, so these are the total number of columns we have here. So if you should count them, there are 4 columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So in grid, and in flex system, you guys should understand this concept in flex system. You could only have one column, one row, regardless of how your flex system look. Just put that as like a concept at the back of your mind, that you could only have one column. So even if you have a situation like this, right? This, um, literally speaking, this implies having 2 rows. So basically, this is a row, and this one here, this other line here, is also a row. You get? So I'm going to put it at the right hand side here. To signify when I'm referring to rows and when I'm referring to columns. So basically, okay, let me just put that at the bottom. Right. So basically, we have 2 rows and we have 8 columns, right? That's on the technical, that's on the literal aspect of things. But with grids, with flex system, technically you could just only have 1 row, right? You could just technically have only 1 row. And in this case, this can be considered a flex on its own, and this can be considered a flex on its own. Right? So regardless of if your flex should come into this shape or not, technically speaking, you just have 1 row in flex system and multiple columns, right? Regardless of how they may look. But literally, as you can see, we have 2 rows. And there's something very important you guys should be aware of when it comes to rows and columns in grid systems. So you see this row right now, right? This row we have here can be referred to as the main axis. So we call it main axis, right? So that is the row, right? Now the column is referred to as the cross axis. So here is referred to as the cross axis. Uh, okay. So this is referred to as the cross axis. So So let's duplicate this, put it here. Sorry, here. Okay, so this is the cross axis, right? So now this main axis and cross axis, you may be asking, what is the importance, right? Well, there's a very significant importance, and we're going to get to it pretty soon, right? So um, the row axis, the main axis and the cross axis, I'll explain that to you pretty soon. But let's first of all, let's work with this our row and great the rows and column and see how it's going to look like on a code, right? So if we go to our code now, what is going to happen is I'm going to create um, okay, we are going to have this div called wrap, and in this wrap we're going to have a couple of boxes, right? So uh, we're going to have, let's say, 8 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And these 8 boxes, I'm going to go to our CSS and do some styling. So class 2 CSS, right? Um, oh, okay, it's not here. Yeah, am I doing my styling? Oh, sorry, class CSS, right? Okay, so now I'm going to increase the width of I'm going to reduce the width of this box to 15, and let's call this again. Okay, right? And I'm going to remove some styles I did. So media query we did before. Let's see, this is out. Okay, grab mean height. I'm going to do this. Okay. What is giving this thing the height it's having right now? Uh, let's see. Okay. So this is not a height, just a bunch of boxes, right? So I'm going to create like a margin between the boxes. So I'm going to say margin to margin top. I'm just going to say 1 rem. Okay, so now we could see we have a couple of boxes, right? So we have 8 boxes here. So now how can we arrange these boxes in a row or in a row? We can do that by using the code display, right? And we can say display flex, right? This margin that is here, I'm going to, so when we use display flex, the question is where should we put this display flex? We should, naturally your display flex should be, at the at the div wrapping the items you want to you want it to be in a row. So basically speaking, this is practically like we call them flex items, right? So these are flex items. So basically each individual column are referred to as flex item, while the div wrapping this column are referred to as what? Are referred to as flex container. And it is because of this concept that is why I said technically with flex you tend to have just one row, not multiple rows, because this wrap you get can signify what the row. So I'm going to do something to make it more readable. I'm going to change it to row, right? So this is the row, and it's referred to technically as flex container. While these boxes are the what? The columns, and they are technically referred to as what? Uh, flex items. So I'm going to change it to row, column, and row. So it makes more sense, right? So now, by default, when you arrange items, when you make something display flex, right? So when you add this display flex to the row, because that is, you remember the row is going to be responsible for creating your flex items, right? So when you add display flex to the row, what happens is by default it arranges the flex items or the columns in a horizontal pattern, which is what we are saying right here. However, we could control that behavior by using another property called flex direction, right? So we have four flex directions, right? They are row, which is the default. You have column, which is arranging them like vertically, as you could see. Then you have row reverse, right? So how does this row reverse work? So I'm just going to make some edits to our HTML. So in each of these boxes, right, I'm going to just put a span, and in that span, I'm going to put a text called just okay. Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to get rid of all this code. I'm going to write it again with some uh, code completion. So I'm going to say a div, right? This div is going to have a class of code, and each of the code items is going to have a span, and that span is going to have the word code and number, and this number is going to be the number of items we are having. So we are going to have 8 items, and voila. So now I could properly explain how row reverse works. So you can see if we use row, you could see that it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? However, when we use row reverse, it's the reverse of it. So it starts from 8 and it goes to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then finally, we have column reverse. So column reverse. And this is basically arranging them horizontally, but 1 comes last and 8 comes first. So these are all the directions you could use with flex system. So now, as we could see, we have content, right, inside our flex. You have this code here and all that stuff. So how can we arrange content inside our flex systems? Well, that is where understanding that is where we're going to go back to understanding the main and the cross axis, right? So there are 2 things I want you guys to remember when dealing with flex. You need to remember something called justify content, right? And align items, right? You need to remember these 2 things. These are very important when working with flex systems, right? So I'm going to comment on this, right? And I'll leave and I'll go to like the Figma to explain some stuff. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the second column here. Or it doesn't matter. I'm just going to leave it. So what you should understand is how justify items and justify content works, right? So when you say justify content, you are affecting the content inside of the column, right? That's what justify content does. However, when you say align items, you are affecting the column itself, right? So when you say justify item, first of all, you need to understand that justify items affect the what? The cross axis. Are you getting it? It affects the cross axis, right? Why justify content affects the main axis? The main axis. So let's put it into work. So now in this stuff, I'm going to give it row, right? And let's go to like a much bigger screen. So let's go to our browser and where's the browser? Okay. So this is our browser. So let's open this file here. Great. So I'm going to expect element and I'm going to make the expect element a little bit bigger. So now what was going to happen? I want to show you some things that's going to happen. So in this our column, so in this column here, I'm going to do something. I'm going to say in this our row, I'm going to say uh, justify, sorry, align items. Align items. Now watch what's going to happen. I say center. Now look what happens here. You could see there's this line, right? That you could see in the screen, right? That's how justify item work. So it's affecting, as you can see, it's affecting, oh sorry, it's affecting the main axis, right? And if you look at this place in our browser, when we say center, you could see that there are different ways you could justify stuff. You could see it's affecting the cross axis. As you can see, there are different ways it affects. So you can see this is the cross axis, right? The cross axis. Basically, you could see from, I don't know if I can't really zoom this. I really want to zoom this for you guys. But basically, what we have in this place here that I want you guys to see is that when we say justify content center, what happens is that it makes sure everything around the cross axis become at the center. So how do we prove that? This is what I'm going to do. Each boxes, I'm going to give them different height. So I'm going to give the boxes different height. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to get rid of all this code. I'm going to generate them again. So I'm going to say div col times 8. It's going to have span, and that span is going to have the text col and a number. And in addition to this column, I'm going to create another class. I'm going to call it col hyphen a specific number. So with this, I am going to generate. Okay. So now in our CSS, I'm going to make some changes as well. So I'm going to say col dot col hyphen 2 should be the height. I'm going to change this height property. I'm going to turn it to something like I'm going to remove 5, so I'm going to say 10. Then I'm going to do um, code 3. Code 3 is going to be 5, right? So what's going to happen is that you can see they are all having different height, and it's displaying kind of different, isn't it? However,
Sorry, can you hear me? Good evening. Sorry
yeah,
for the
okay,
interruption. Okay, please, can
okay.
you like zoom in on your CSS file, please?
Oh, I
Because
should zoom in on
yeah,
this.
yes, please, so we can see the code. Thank you.
Is it okay now?
Just one more will be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Uh, all right. So now, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna come here, and you see this align center. I'm gonna comment on it, right? So when I comment on align center, you could now see that there's like this imaginary line that has drawn at the center, putting all of them together, having like one center point. You get. So if we go back to our browser, you could see it expressed more clearly here. So this is the imaginary line I'm talking about. You can see it's drawn, right? So that's the imaginary line I'm talking about. So remember when I said align items affect your cross axis? This is what I mean. So if there's another property called you could use end, or you could use flex end. Flex end is more of the modern one. Then end is more like the older one, like the old version. So flex end, you could now see all the items are dropped down, right? Yes. And if we go back to our browser and if we hover on it, you could see flex end. You could see the line is now aligning the stuff at the bottom, right? So if, for those wondering, is this purple line I'm referring to? This purple line here, this thick purple line. And that applies to when we say flex start as well. You can see it moves everything to the up. So flex aligns stuff to the what? To around the cross axis. And we learned earlier that what is the cross axis? This point. This point is the cross axis, right? So this point is the cross axis. Sorry about that. Let's draw properly again. Yeah, so this point is the cross axis, right? And that is how the align items work with this. Why justify content work with the main axis? So the main axis is that it justifies these grid items. So each column, it justifies them around the what? The main axis. So let's put that into work. So if I come here and play, see it work. And the reason is for that, um, because we don't have the width. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give this row a border so we can see things clearly. So I'm going to say border is going to be 1 rem solid. Let's go L. Yeah. Okay, I think this 1 rem is like way too much. So I'm just going to, yeah. So this is the row. So as you can see from this diagram here, our row isn't really that much big, right? All the content can fit into our row. What if we have cases where the content can't fit into the size of the row? So I'm going to comment on a couple of items here. So when you comment on stuff, it makes it um, ignored by your browser, by your code when your browser when it's run. So now that we have commented on the code, you could see something column will now be arranged at the center based on the what? The main axis, right? So if I hover on this, you could see it's how it placed things what at the center. And what does it, but what did it place at the center? It placed the entire what? The entire um, row, the entire columns at the center. So that's why we said um, uh, it, just as the way flex applies to the cross axis. So I'm going to make this items applies on the cross axis. You could see that justify items applies to the what? To the main axis, right? And you could do just as flex, you could do center, you could do what? Start, right? Um, there are special ones with justify content. I'm just going to use them one after the other. So you have this space between. What does space between? There's space around. So what space around does? It puts an equal space at the beginning and at the beginning and at the end, right? It puts an that's what space around does. It puts an equal space at the beginning and at the end, right? And whatever space is remaining is going to share that between. And here we just have one column, so it divided it equally between here and here because you just have one column in between. If there are two columns, it's going to divide it into three and apply them equally. But basically, how its main focus is putting equal space at the beginning, at the beginning and at the end. That's the work of space around. Then the second one is space between, right? So space between ignores the space at the beginning and the space at the end. However, the space in between columns, right? It puts an equal space in between columns. So the more items we have here, it's going to divide it properly. So if I should duplicate this element, and you can see, right? You can see the space here, here, here are all the same. So that's basically how space in between work. You can see it's putting in between equal spaces in between each column. What it does, it puts an equal amount of space at the beginning and at the end, and in between columns, right? So the difference between space around and space evenly is that space around just puts an equal space at the beginning and at the end, and that's it. Then whatever space is left in between the columns, it divides it, right? However, space evenly puts an equal space, the amount of space put at the beginning and put at the end is equal to the amount of space in between columns, right? While space between totally ignores the beginning and the end and just make sure that there are equal space in between columns. Then, right, so this is flex end, right? You can see it puts it, like I said, it's arranging things aligned around main axis. So when we say flex end, it moves to the right. When we say flex start, it moves to the left. So flex start, you can place all the columns in the center. All you have to do is just to justify item center and justify content center, and you can like practically in the center. You can see, right? So for those who, let's do this experiment. So I'm going to manually delete some elements here, right? Just to prove to you that things are in the center. So we just have one item, one grid item. And here I'm going to give the grid a height. So I'm going to give a height of, let's say 20 rem, or 20 rem is too small. Okay, you can see now it's at the center. So look, watch how it works. So first, justify content. You can see it applies to the main axis. So you can, but now with the justify content applied, you can see it moved, right? The same thing with the align items, right? Before that, items things always start at the top, but we justify items, you can see it moves at the center. So now we've properly put the box in the center of what of our row, right? So that is, so basically this is flex. Uh, so this is what you need to know about flex. We have the main axis, we have the cross axis, and we have columns, and we have rows. There's one more thing I'm going to show you about flex. But before that, I just want to point out something very important, right? So and what triggers that change, it's based on. So for example, let's just say with this diagram we have here, our flex direction is set as what? Row, right? Our flex direction is set as row. However, let's have a scenario where our flex direction is not set as row, but set as column. So let's duplicate this and move it this way. So if our flex direction is set as column, right, this is what is going to happen. So I'm just going to twist this thing like this, right? Forgive the drawing, but this is what happens when you set your flex direction to column. It twists this. You can say it's being twisted around, right? So now you can see now the top becomes the cross axis, while the main axis becomes what? The side, right? So when you set your this factor, that your main axis becomes what? Becomes vertically aligned, right? While your cross axis becomes what? Horizontally what? The horizontal part, while your main axis becomes the vertical side. So this is what happens when you what? When you set flex direction to column. It's just something I want you guys to be aware of. It's very important when dealing with flex. So basically, this example is when it is set to flex direction of either row or row reverse. It doesn't really matter. This is basically what it does, right? Then this is what happens when it sets to either column or column reverse. Just as a simple reminder, what I'm referring to as the flex direction is this property. You could set it to column, you could set it to column reverse, you could set it to what? Row reverse, right? So based on the value you set here, whenever I set to row, your main axis is at the horizontal plane and your cross axis is at the vertical plane. However, whenever you set this to column, regardless of the type of column, your main axis becomes the vertical plane, while your cross axis becomes the horizontal plane. This is very important. Now, with that, let's go back to with understanding that factor. I'm going to change this to row, right? And I want to show you guys something very tricky, right? So I'm going to give this a width of, let's say, 60. So I'm saying width of 60 rem, right? So this width of 60 rem, I'm going to increase the number of boxes we have here, right? So I'm going to comment on the previous number of boxes. So we set each number of boxes to be 15 rem, right? 15 rem as the width, isn't it? To be 15 rem as the width, right? So I'm going to comment sorry, we set each of the width to be 15 rem, right? So since we set each of this width to be 15 rem, I'm going to change this to center. Okay, so since we set each width to be 15 rem, right? Since all these columns are inside this row, do you guys practically think things can fit? The answer is no. Because why? If you multiply 15 by, so if we say 15 multiplied by 8, it's going to give us 120. So on a normal scale, for these 8 boxes to fit into our 60 rem that we have here, this row is not supposed to be 60, but rather it's supposed to be 120, right? It's supposed to be 120. That is how things are going to display well. But right now we are fitting all these things in, and yet the width is just 60 rem, which is not the proper value that is needed. And that is done because of something. That's something that you guys need to also understand about how row works, right? So by default, you see what happens is that whenever the row is not able to fit in the items, what happens is that each column gets shrunk down. It gets shrunk down, right? So this is what happens. So let's increase this by 1. So let me show you what I mean. If we look at the width of this column, so let's look at it, right? Look at the width of this column. So let's go to computed. You could see the width is 54 pixels, right? So now what happens when I increase the number of width, right? So let me increase this by 1, so by duplicating. You can see it has changed to 46, right? That's changed to 46. So it keeps reducing the width of each individual column to fit in more columns. So if I do this again, duplicate, look, it has reduced it again. So now it's now 39, right? It's 39, which is reducing so each of the width of this column is 39. The value we want. It's supposed to have the value of 150, but now it's having 39, which is wrong, right? So how do we fix this behavior? Well, there's a property in Flex in Flex system called Flex Wrap. So let's see what it does, right? By default, if you say Flex Wrap, so Flex Wrap, right? By default, it's set as what? As no wrap. No wrap means it's going to keep shrinking stuff, right? It's going to keep shrinking the items, right? However, Flex Wrap, when you use the word wrap instead of no wrap, what happens is that it's not going to shrink the items, but rather it's going to create this grid-like format for it. So whenever the space needed is not available, it's going to move things downward. So yeah, it needed 15 rem. Good, it works. You put it in. You needed 15 rem again. It worked. You put it in. The same thing here. But this this leftover space is not up to 15 rem. So what? It brings the 4th item down, right? It brings it down. Why? Because this 15 rem doesn't fit. So this is how Flex Wrap work. And this is why you have this kind of like a grid layout when working with Flex. But you should understand that it's just displaying in this manner. Your computer does not see this as a new row. It doesn't see this. Your computer doesn't see this as a new row. It doesn't see this as a new row. You get? It doesn't do that. And that is why from 1 to 3, 4. It didn't start from 1 to 3, then 1 to 3 again, and 1 to 3 again. You can see 1 to 3, then it comes to 4. So this entire system you are seeing here is just one row. This is what I'm trying to explain to you guys, that when you are using Flex system and you have this kind of layout, technically speaking, you have just one row. So a Flex can't have more than one row, technically speaking. Regardless of how it is visually represented, you can't have more than one row. However, you can have as much columns as you want. Now, there's one more thing I need to teach you guys called basically things you can apply to individual Flex items, right? And these things are called Flex Grow, Flex Shrink, and Flex Basis, right? So what does Flex Grow and Flex Shrink? What are they? So what's going to happen is I'm going to remove this width property, right? When removing this width property, automatically speaking, what happens is that your flex system, what it does is it automatically gives your flex a width of its own, right? Gives it a width of its own. However, if you want to set a default value for that width, right, on the flex item itself, you could do this called flex basics, right? So flex basics, you could set the flex basics property to a specific width, for example, 10 rem, right? And with this is going to be the default width whenever this width property is not seen, right? But whenever this width property is seen, it's going to what? It's going to use that property. So what happens is that I'm going to come here and I'm going to say dot code 1, which is referring to the first column. I'm going to give it a width, and this width, I'm going to say it should be what? 40 rem, right? And once I give it 40 rem, okay, so yeah, so I'm going to remove the, yeah, it's 40 rem. This is supposed to work. Let's see. Yeah, I'm correct. Let's go to the browser and let's investigate. So 40 rem. Why is this property not working? Oh, okay. So right, I'm going to explain it to you. So for this flex property, for this width property, there's something you guys should also understand, right? This width property, uh, by default, is supposed to work, right? However, there's something else that is preventing it from working, and that is something we refer to as the flex grow and the flex shrink property. So flex grow and flex shrink is basically what happens whenever there is what available or there are no available space in a flex row. So right now, by default, all flex items shrink, right? All flex items shrink by default. So what's going to happen is that for this width to be recognized, I have to make sure that I set the flex grow property, right, to 1. So it simply means I want this flex item to grow, right? So by default, it means whatever the width is, whenever I set it to 1, it means that this flex property is going to what? This flex is going to what? Is going to grow, right? That's what is going to happen. So that's something very important, right? And what flex grow does, it takes over the available space, right? The values you could set for flex grow, when working with flex grow or flex shrink, it's more of like a ratio, right? So what's going to happen is, just to explain flex grow and flex shrink properly, I'm going to go back to the HTML and I'm going to comment on all these items. We're just going to have 3 items so we don't have confusion, right? And I'm going to explain how flex grow and flex shrink work. So flex grow and flex shrink, if I should remove this width, you can see that the nothing happens, right? And the reason is because by default, our flex items work by shrinking, right? But when we set flex grow, what happens is that it makes it possible to say, okay, if we set a particular column to grow, it means that whatever whatever space that is left after equally dividing the flex items based on the width we've set on the flex basis, it should what? That particular item should take the remaining space, right? So what happens is that your computer gives 10 rem to this and 10 rem to this, and the leftover space to what? To the first column. So that's what flex grow does, right? It makes this item what? Grow when there's what? Available space. So if by default, if we set it to 0, it means this item will never grow, right? they would never grow. However, um, if we set our flex, as you can see, when we don't have flex basis in our, so I just want to point out something, right? So this flex basis that is here, I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it in this stuff here, right? So you can see flex basis. When we set flex basis, right? The flex basics here is taking precedent, and the reason why it's taking precedent over width is because width comes first. Width came first, and like I've explained to you guys earlier, when it comes to CSS, whatever when two codes are meant to do the same thing, the one that comes last takes precedent. So if I should come down and I should put width here and change it to 40 rem. Oh, okay. So I'm going to correct my statement. I think whenever you set flex basis, it overrides whatever you put at the width value. This is a new behavior, funny enough, but it's fine. So whenever you set flex basis, it overrides what you put as the width value. So basically, if you don't have flex basis, then width comes into play. Once you don't have flex basis, width comes into play. But once you have flex basis, that is what is going to be used in your code. So let's go back to what we have before, right? So by default, flex grow. When you say, now I'm going to do something, right? So I want to explain flex grow and flex shrink to you guys properly so you guys get it. So I'm going to do something. So I'm going to say flex grow. This first box, I'm going to say flex grow. I'm going to set it to 1, right? Then this second box here, I'm going to set the flex grow property to 2, right? So I'm going to say flex grow. I'm going to set it to 2, right? Now, look at what's happening. This box here, right? As you can see, this box here, but column 2 is larger than column 1, and it's larger than column 3. However, both column 1 and column 2 has a flex grow property. However, since column 2 has a flex grow property of 2, it means it will grow 2 times bigger than column 1. That's what it means. So basically, the numbers you set for flex grow or flex shrink are basically is going to be in ratio. So for example, if you have a box, right? So let's say we create a circle, right? So let's come here and create a circle, right? So let's create a circle, right? I'm gonna make the circle like properly rounded, please. So let's say we create a circle, right? And in this circle, I say, so let's increase this circle a bit. So let's say in this circle, I want to divide it into um, uh, into I want to represent what we've done now in our browser. So this what we've done here. So this 3 has a flex growth of 0 by default. Then this one has a flex growth of 2, and this has a flex growth of 1. If we want to represent it in terms of ratio, it means um, the column 2 is going to have the largest one, followed by column 1, Z, followed by column 1, or let's do it this way. I'm going to do this, and I am going to bring it down. All right. So basically, if I were to represent this in a circle, like if you guys remember when you guys did ratio in mathematics in school when you guys were like way younger, so this is going to be represented as col 2, right? Then this is going to be col 1, right? And this is going to be col 3, right? Col 3. So, and this is because of, so this is how the ratio works, right? So this is what flex grow does. So flex grow says whenever there's available space, what is the growth factor of specific what columns. So if you want your columns to be always equal, regardless of whenever there's available space, what you have to do is that in the row section, all you have to do is to set the flex. All you have to do is to set the in this row section, in this column, like this, you can see there's this col I did here, which represents every single column, right? All you have to do is to set the growth factor of so grow, flex grow. You have to set it to 1, right? So by default, all your flex items are going to have the same what? The same growth factor. They're going to always be all your, regardless of the width, regardless of what you set as the flex basis, right? It's always going to grow. All your items are always going to grow to fill the available space. So this is how flex grow work. Why flex shrink works the reverse, right? So here in our, so what's going to happen is I'm going to remove this flex grow property I've set here, and I'm going to replace this flex shrink property, this flex grow property here, to flex shrink. So when I do that, what it means, so I'm going to say flex shrink 1, right? And I'm going to set the default flex shrink to 0. So I'm going to say, okay, flex shrink. So flex shrink to 0. This means I don't want my items to shrink, right? I don't want them to shrink. So when I set flex shrink to 0, watch what happens, right? So we set this growth factor to be 1, right? Now this column 3, right? I'm going to set the what is it called? This flex 3, I'm also going to set the growth factor of this one to be 1 as well. So flex grow, I'm going to set it to be 1, right? So now you can see what happens now. These items are going to keep growing based on the available space, while this is going to keep shrinking. So if we look at this, our flex box here, right, you could see the growth factor shown in this purple arrow here. So let's look at it again. You could see there's this purple arrow showing how it grew. You can see it grew so large, right? Then look at this third column. You could see in this third column as well, you could see it's showing the growth factor with this purple line that you are seeing here as well, right? So the one that the line that is that has like horizontal the line that has this horizontal slashes, basically those slashes that you see here. So let's hover again. You get those slashes. That is the default size, right? So the line that drew across it, this other purple line that drew across it, shows you the growth factor, how it grew. However, if you look at the last one, you could see, since the shrink factor, we set the shrink factor to 1, right? So since we set it to 1, whenever there's no space, this second column is going to keep shrinking, giving more space for the other items to work with. So what's going to happen is this row, I'm going to decrease the width. So let me make it like 20. Now, since I've made it 20, I'm going to remove this flex wrap property, right? You get. So now, as you can see, when I made it 20, this one shrank as much as best as it could, trying to fit in whatever all the items we have. Even if there's like available space, you could see here, right? But you could see this kept shrinking. And if we hover on the item, right? If we hover on the second one, you could see the arrow shows how much it's shrinking inside. So you can see the arrow is going inside instead of going outward like it would in this in column 3. So look at, let's zoom in, right? So look at column 3. You can see the arrow is stretching outward, showing you how it grew. But in column 2, you can see it's the line is going inside, showing you how what it shrunk. So this is everything you need to know about Flex system. So one final thing I want to expose to you guys is, where can we use Flex system when we have a website? Well, identifying where to use Flex system in a website is very simple and very easy to understand, right? So let's look at this website as an example. Where can we use Flex and where can we use grid system? So let's say you look at this text fashion, right? I'm going to change this to a rectangle. So look at this text fashion. This practically means what? We could use Flex here. So I'm going to create stroke and remove that. So we could basically use Flex system here, right? And we could divide it like this. So we could have what? This kind of column. So in this, you would know that this word fashion is going to have what? Our Flex grow property, right? Then this logo is going to have the Flex what? Shrink property. You get? So this is a very good example we could use what? Flex. You'll be asking, what other place can we use Flex again? Well, you see, let's go back here and let me show you another place we could use Flex. You see all this, you see this entire navigation bar here. So let's add stroke, remove the border. You could see we could use what? Flex system here as well. However, just like before, you can separate it as well. So you could know that this element here is going to have our what? Our growth factor. So the flex grow is going to apply to this side, and the shrink is going to apply what? To this side. Are you guys, am I making sense to you guys? So this is an example of where we can use flex. You can be asked, what other place can we use flex again? In this same menu, right? We could still use flex again here, right? So in this menu here, okay, so I'm going to Control Z. Yeah, so let's do it one more time. So in this menu here, we could still use what? Flex here, right? Here. So let's let me create the stroke and remove the. So you see, and in this point, what kind of flex can what can we do with this flex? You could just simply say justify content space evenly, get all space are between. So whenever we use space between or space evenly, if you put equal space, if we use space evenly, it's going to put equal space between the beginning of what each stuff, right? Between the beginning and the end and each of this stuff, right? It's going to put equal space here, 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 here. You could see, right? However, if we say space between, right? What happens is it's going to ignore what happens is it's going to ignore uh, it's going to ignore uh, this beginning one here. Let me see if I can zoom and get it. Uh, why is it not coming? Okay, let's Control Z quickly. So if we say space between, what happens is that it's just going to put what? An equal space around this item here, right? It's going to put an equal space here, here, and here. So there's a ton of places you could use flex for, right? In this, just in this layout, we could look at a lot of places we could use flex for. We could use flex for here as well, right? So we could use flex here as well, right? And This is our flex. What happened with the sorry, our stroke was not showing. Okay, so here you could see we could use flex here as well, right? We could use flex. We could even make this particular box here, we could make it a flex as well. So basically, we could do this whereby this here is also what? A flex. So let's add stroke, remove this, right? So what can we do? So this all content, one column, another column, right? Then this button can also be a flex of its own, right? So this could be a flex, right? So let's add stroke, remove this stuff, and rule. You can see. So you could see we could use flex in most layout we want to build in modern web development. You could use flex for them, right? All you just need to know is understand how to use flex properly. I'm way past the allocated time, so I'm going to stop here for today. We're going to look into grid later on in our tomorrow class. But I'm going to open the floor for questions. So please shoot, ask me questions.
Okay, so the questions are
Okay,
being displayed on the screen, so you can take them.
okay. The
Thank you.
first question say, please, is line height a flex property, and what does it actually do? Okay, line height is not a flex property. It's actually a font property. So I'm going to share my screen so I could explain what line height does, right? So line height basically, um, so if you take this, um, let's look for, okay, good. If you look at this paragraph here, you could see that there's a space in between here, right? You see this space in between here. This is what line height is. The font property is the height between fonts, right? So this is one sentence, right? This spending minimum of whatever, spending minimum of $100 to get 30% of voucher code for your next purchase. You can see this whole stuff here is one paragraph. So the line between words words vertically in a paragraph is what line height is. Line height is, and it has nothing to do with flex. Next question. The next question. Okay, I'm unable to follow your code as you give live. Can you please share the code after? Okay, yeah, I can do that. I can share the code. Or you could watch the live video. It's going to be on YouTube and all that stuff. So you could actually pause the video at that point in time to see whatever code I wrote. Okay, next question. It says, please, what about flex inline slash block? Okay, uh, display could be set as flex. We've done display inline and display block in our previous classes. If you don't understand it, you could go and watch those videos. But basically, we've explained display. So, like I said, elements can either be um, uh, block elements or inline elements, right? However, the display property could be set to the following. You could set to display them as display inline. You could set them to display block. You could set them to display flex. You could set them to display grid. You get flex is one of the display property you could apply to elements. However, note your flex elements actually your flex item itself is actually a block element underneath everything. Your flex, if you ask what type of, when you said display flex to an element, the type that is going to be categorized into is going to be as a block element. Next question. Let's see. Can we use both flexes on the same element or one we casting? So if you could have it. Okay, so you could have a flex container, and inside that flex container, you could have you could have another flex container as well. That's what we call that's like a nested tree of flexes. It doesn't really matter. You can have as much as you want. So in let's take this code for example, right? So I can this div is a flex container, right? So let's say I have multiple items here that I want to arrange. So let's say I have another span here for example, right? So things becomes like this. Yeah, sorry, here, yeah. So if I have something like this can be a flex. This I can set this property to display flex. Then I can set this property as well to display flex and arrange and this becomes what the flex item to this flex, right? But whenever you have something like this, it's always advised, since this is a flex item, it's always advised to just do something like this, whereby you just have another item here, right? And this one now becomes what? The flex instead, right? So you set this one to become the flex instead, and this remains a flex item. Most times it's advisable for your flex item not to be a flex property as a whole. You get because by default setting this as flex, we automatically inherit whatever width this one has, right? So but if you're asking if this can be set as flex as well, the answer is yes. But this having another div wrapping whatever flex items you have is the standard best practice or behavior. Okay, so let's see next question.
All right, I think Will, that's the last question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think that is the last question for today. Yeah, that's the last question for today.
Okay. Thank you all very much for today's class. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, Will, for today's class. And please, for those of us that joined very late and for those of us that are having network issue, please, the video is available on YouTube. Please do well to watch it again before you come for tomorrow's class. For those that are not able to join on time and for those having network issue and are not clear to this class, please do well to go back and watch the videos and come back tomorrow. Thank you so much. So we'll continue tomorrow by 8 p.m. Nigerian time. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you so much. And then bye everyone. Good night. Thank you.
Bye, bye everyone.